If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
But I do want to go back to Saturday night because it was a special night at Madison Square Garden. The franchise celebrated the 50th anniversary of its NBA championship. Members of the 1973 team, including Walt Clyde Frazier, Jerry Lucas, Bill Bradley, Earl Monroe, Dick Barnett, were all in attendance for the festivities, while the captain, Willis Reed, delivered a video message on the MSG Jumbotron. The 1973 Knicks finished with 57 wins in that regular season. They beat the Lakers in 5 games to win their second NBA championship. Willis Reed was named Finals MVP. The Knicks had at least 5 players in that series averaged 15 points against the Lakers, and 6 players will be inducted into the Hall of Fame as players on that roster. Phil Jackson, who was a player on that team, was later inducted as a coach. Red Holtzman, of course, who was coach of that team, inducted as a coach. And Dick McGuire, who was a scouting assistant on that team, also a former player who was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So just a world-class collection of talent on that 1973 team. What did you think of the ceremony that happened on Saturday?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was great the way they handled it. And, these guys are getting up there in years. We see, a couple players have already passed away. They're represented by their children and, wheelchairs and canes. And, that happens when guys get up around that age. So, it's important to give those folks their flowers, while they can still smell them, certainly. So I thought that was a really cool moment. I thought the Garden appreciated it. As you mentioned, I thought it was cool the way the players, the current players handled it too. Pre-game, Tibbs talked about being a teenager in Connecticut, rooting for those teams and being a Knicks fan. And after the game, Barrett and Quickly, and Randall talked about how, just having those guys courtside, having those guys in the arena, they kind of wanted to show out and make those guys proud. And I certainly think the way they played, and obviously not just getting the win, but, as you mentioned, the 5 players averaging over 15 points, and because that was the consummate team mentality, and I think it's kind of a high that Knicks fans have been chasing for the last 50 years or so, and even people born in New York well after those years, listen to their uncles and their fathers and their grandfathers, tell stories about passing and unselfishness and all that kind of stuff. And it's been kind of an ethos that the 90s Knicks tried to live up to, and any great team that the Knicks currently have or will have in the future will be compared to those great early 70s teams, as well they should be, because that's kind of the benchmark. So, it was. I thought it was well earned, obviously, and I thought they handled it well. So kudos to everybody all around.
Yeah, it was an awesome ceremony. The gold varsity jackets they gave out, sweet look, just like an awesome. It's gotta be dope to like be one of the 12 or 13 people who have those 50th anniversary jackets.
Well, Clyde said he might put on eBay, so I'm going to be checking eBay.
Well, I hope you paid your credit card bill, because that's not going to go for a small penny. I actually do have quickly a little bit of sound from Clyde Frazier talking about what it meant to represent New York during that time.
Enjoyed playing so much with these men. It was such a provocative experience. We had a veteran team. We understood the nuances of having New York on our chest. We knew the high expectations, but we relished those expectations because we knew we lived in the greatest city in the world. We played in the world's most famous arena. And we had unequivocally the greatest fans. So you guys gave us so much confidence that we would say, not in our house, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, not in our house, Kareem and Oscar Robinson. We are the New York Knicks.
I mean, this doesn't get better than that. And it was awesome to hear those stories of that team. And in some ways, I feel like the 73 team sometimes gets like forgotten a little bit because that first championship was so important and also so dramatic.
Yes,
You know, the captain gets hurt. You don't know if he's gonna play. He comes out there in the tunnel minutes before tip off. He hit the first 2 jump shots. Like it's so dramatic and it almost sounds like a movie. We kind of forget about 1973. Like, you know, in the Eastern Conference Finals, they beat the number 1 seeded Boston Celtics. That was a team that I think after that point, I don't think they ever lost a Game 7 at home in Boston. Like they were a juggernaut, of course, during those years of Bill Russell. Bill Russell had retired at this point, but I mean, winning in the Boston Garden at home or on the road in the Game 7 was a death sentence. It was impossible, and the fact that Knicks team did that was a huge moment in NBA history, and they used that momentum and then go on and kind of dominate the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. And just the depth on that team. I mean, you talk about the backcourt with Monroe and Frazier, and then the fact they were add a guy like Jerry Lucas to an already dominant front court with Willis Reed and Dave DeBusschere, and of course Bill Bradley just being the consummate professional, just like consistent player. Like when I talk to older Knicks fans and they talk about those teams, like I get it. Like I don't sit there and say, oh, here we go talking about the 76. Like, no, like if you love basketball, like go on Basketball Reference, maybe my favorite website of all time, and look at just the talent collection that they had. And when you see, you know, sometimes they don't show many full games anymore on NBA TV, things like that. But just do yourself a favor and watch some clips of just how that team moved the ball, how unselfish that team was, how that team defended. It's why we have the defense chant in sports. Like that started with the Garden crowd chanting for the defense of the 1970s teams. Just an awesome time to be a Knicks fan.
100%. You know, you mentioned the 6 players that went on to the Hall of Fame and the coaching staff, and it remarkable. Also makes you appreciate it. You know, one of the things I think of is Patrick Ewing doing what he did during the 90s with, you know, role players, essentially, you know, Starks and Oakley with full stars, let alone Hall of Fame players. I mean, but again, you know, as you mentioned, if we had been alive during that time, I'm sure we'd still be talking about it today. So it's certainly they deserve their recognition, and they got it. And you know, we'll see if the Knicks can continue to keep that spirit alive as they make a push towards you know, they certainly are close to reaching those heights yet. But as you mentioned, these are small steps, and they can take another step Monday night. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it will be important and fun to see how this team can continue to embody that spirit. I also want to give a quick shout out to the great Red Holtzman, who, of course, is not with us anymore, but was honored in that ceremony. Like, I think he's one of the more underrated. When we talk about the great coaches in NBA history, he always gets forgotten. I mean, and I know there are now, as we move on through our history, there are several coaches that have multiple championships. But when you consider what he did with that Knicks team almost immediately when he got here, and he made them an instant title contender. They won 2 championships. They went to 3 NBA finals. How they played in the playoffs. Like people forget in 72, they went to the NBA finals. They were only a 48 win team. Like, he just was, and how he got them to play together and how he got them to play defense. Like, I just think that he doesn't get the kind of respect that probably he deserves and what he means to not just the Knicks organization, but just to the NBA game as a whole. One of the best coaches in NBA history. So major shout out to Red Holtzman.
And you talk about the coaching trees of the great coaches. Phil Jackson, time and time again, you know, mentioned so many of the key tenets of coaching philosophy that he learned, that he later imparted onto his teams. He learned from Red Holtzman as well. So definitely a factor in there as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned the players that were, you know, not with us and had their sons. So the son of Dave DeBusschere was there. Shout out to my guy Dean Meminger, a New York One reporter and anchor who I actually worked with for a long time because I worked at New York One for 6-7 years. Dean's a great guy, and of course he was representing his dad, Dean the Dream Meminger, who played on that 73 team. So it was awesome to see those guys represented as well. It was just a fun night.
Dave DeBusschere's grandson is
grandson. Yes,
but his I think his son was there, but his grandson is actually a guard on Chaminade High School basketball team.
Oh, that is right. Yes, I did talk about that in the broadcast.
A little cool thing. I think he's a
Yeah,
senior.
apparently he's a really good player too. I heard.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know.
He's a little bit undersized. He's like a 6'1"
Yeah.
shooting guard, but yeah, as a Chaminade alum, I've kept an eye on him the last couple of years. So hopefully he's
Yeah.
doing well.
Absolutely, but absolute fun night, a fun weekend, and hopefully we'll continue a fun season with this New York Knicks team. But that's gonna